these are the guys that got Osama bin Laden last year. Somebody grabs my feet, like my ankles, and then another set of hands grab my shoulders and pull the blanket away from me. And I just have my hands in front of me. I'm trying to protect myself. Very angry. He looks very angry. Man dressed in a police uniform. He's got an AK. He pulls Abdurazak out and slams him to the ground and hits him in the head with the butt of his AK. And I remember feeling sorry for him, like thinking, oh my God, like, is he okay? All I can think is, this is so bad. This is so bad. If you guys don't do something and get me out of here, like in the next week, I'm going to die and it's going to be your fault.
They also have families and children and wives. Their mission to bring you home, to, open up that opportunity for you. I get emotional just talking about it. I can't imagine living through that.
I think it's important for people to understand that I wasn't working for some like tiny little NGO that was like going around to churches trying to raise money. I'm not out there just like freelancing it on my own. Like, they sent me there.
They would even use their own bodies to protect you.
Yeah. At one point, they didn't think the premises were safe. And so they had Paul and I lay down on the ground. And I don't know how many, I don't remember, 4 maybe of them laid down on top of us. And then the rest of them formed a human shield around us. And we laid like that until the helicopters came in to get us. The fact that somehow, some way, Providence made it possible for like 24 of the Americans, like military, most elite soldiers, found me in the middle of the desert, parachuted out of a helicopter in the middle of the night, and hiked 3 miles in, found me. I didn't get caught in the crossfire. And here I am today.
Jessica Buchanan. Jess, welcome to the Not A Grayman Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you so much for being here. Jess's story is such a remarkable one. She had originally, in 2011, gone overseas to work in northern Somalia. And she's a humanitarian. a advocate for the Navy SEAL Foundation. She went abroad to be able to change the world and make it a better place. And the irony is that the people that she went to go help and serve were the people that ended up taking her captive for over 90 days. And the heroic rescue led by SEAL Team 6 then ensued a few months later. And we'll get into her story. She's an author, she's a mother, and friend. So I just want to welcome you again. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's great. It's a pleasure. And, you know, we just marked Memorial Day, and it's such an honor to have you, especially at this time, given the heroism of the SEAL Team 6 members, but so many of our veterans and fallen heroes that we wouldn't enjoy our liberties and our everyday freedoms had it not been for their silent sacrifice at many times.
Absolutely. And I'm grateful every day.
Yeah, as we all should be. So I usually start out with like the origin story, and I'd love to know a little bit about your childhood and the type of like heart of service that it seems like you must have had to take on such a, to many people, it seemed like an intimidating task to go to Africa to be able to help children. What was it that really drew you to want to go to Africa in the first place?
Wow. Going back to childhood.
Yeah, let's go to those early days.
I grew up in the Midwest, essentially, and just a very, normal-ish, I guess, childhood, you would say. I grew up in the church, and so that, I think, is probably what imprinted on me as a young person, and then a teenager, and then a young adult. There was this idea that to whom much is given, much is required. And so I felt that I had been given a lot in my life. You know, I had received a good education. I went to college. I decided to go into the education field and be a teacher. And I, at one point in my college, like when I'm starting out, applied for a teaching abroad, a position to go to Honduras and work with like a Korean mission, actually, who had started a school in the back country of Honduras. And I'd never really traveled outside of the US. And I thought, oh, this is my chance. And so loved it. And just, I had a classroom full of, I think, 59 fifth and sixth graders, all by myself, didn't speak a lick of Spanish. They didn't speak any English. I've never been so hot in my life. But that is really what, I got bit by that bug of, oh, this is the kind of life that I want to live. And so I went back to college, and I knew I either wanted to go to India or somewhere in Africa. I was very much intrigued, I guess you could say, very got kind of obsessive about the plight of the child soldier, and learned everything I could about what was happening in DRC and South Sudan and northern Uganda. There were a lot of, at the time, these social justice sort of nonprofits that I had gotten involved in. Essentially, one thing led to another, and I ended up going and spending a summer volunteering in South Sudan. It could have ended very badly. I was very lucky. Got caught up in an LRA attack, but okay, of course, because I'm extremely privileged and was able to get out. And that just really set that trajectory of my life in terms of, this is the place that I want to be and these people that I want to work with. And so it's not that easy to just say, oh, I want to go work in South Sudan. Like, you can't just drop in there, you have to actually have like a job. And so that was harder than I thought it was going to be. So I ended up taking a position at an international school in Nairobi, Kenya, which was an actual real job, and started teaching, and then met my now husband about a year or a month and a half into my teaching contract, and he was working in Somalia. So essentially that's how I ended up living and working. And yeah, I followed a guy.
Interesting.
I followed a guy.
Well, I know how that ends up.
Yeah, it ended up very interestingly. I never saw that coming. So,
Wow. Well, I didn't realize that. I for some reason I thought that Somalia was the first place you had gone to.
no, I mean, I honestly, I mean, if I'm being very transparent, I really wanted to work in South Sudan or northern Uganda. But he was working in Somalia, and he'd been working there for a really long time, and working with Somali, with the refugees and with the governance. And so, yeah, I moved up there with him. But what happened, teachers always land on their feet. So, and I always say, once a teacher, always a teacher. Like, I'm always going to be teaching in some capacity, but just because I wasn't in a formal classroom didn't mean there weren't opportunities to teach. And before I knew it, I had a classroom, if you will, a dining room full of Ethiopian refugees who were living on our compound that wanted to learn English. And so, then word got out, oh, there's a teacher in town. So I started doing work for the UN, started doing work for the Ministry of Education, creating materials and curriculum on mine risk education, firearm safety, and conflict management. And that's what led me to securing a position with the Danish Demining Group. So while I was based in Hargeisa, Somaliland, working for DDG, I became the regional education advisor. So the cool thing was my portfolio included South Sudan, northern Uganda, and Kenya. So I got to travel all around and work in all these different, very unique settings with very interesting people groups. Very different, very diverse. And I loved it. I mean, it was like, I always joke, it's not everybody's dream job to go work in Africa, but oh my gosh, it was so mine. And I loved it.
What were the first impressions that you had, when you first landed? Let's start with Honduras, because that was the first time you'd actually left the Midwest, right? And it sounds like you may have lived sort of that sheltered, Midwest small town vibe feel. And then you go to Honduras, which had its set of issues. So, how challenging was that? And then did you face a lot of did you feel intimidated by the new experience? And how did you overcome that?
I'm not sure I felt intimidated. I think I have always been the kind of person that is very open and honest about what I know how to do and what I'm here to learn. And so I don't feel like I need to be the person who comes on the scene and is the expert. So in that regard, I was there to learn. I was there to learn Spanish. I was there to teach English, certainly. But I mean, everybody knew that I'd never been out of the country before. And maybe I do that to protect myself, to keep from disappointment or expectations. But I think it was the first time that I had ever been around true poverty. And that is what that still gets to me to this day, of the fact that there are so many people in the world living on so little, and they need so much help. And I have so much. And it's not this feeling of guilt. It's just this sense of responsibility as a human being, that if there's a way that I can serve, or there's a way that I can help, or I can teach, whatever it is I can do, I'm willing to do it. And so I think perhaps if any challenge I faced, it was, the fact that I don't really have a whole lot of power to change much. I can only do, I can only do what I can do. And when you're young and naive and have your whole life and you think ahead of you, that's a hard lesson to learn, and also I think that there's this idea of, oh well, I'm sacrificing and so people should be grateful or something. But I learned very quickly that no one asked me to come. The world didn't need Jessica Buchanan to go in and save it. I was doing this as much for myself as I was for anybody else. And so those are all really hard notions to to face. Those are challenging mindsets that I perhaps grew up with, because I grew up in the Midwest, because I grew up in the church, and so I would say I've spent a lifetime overcoming those very fixed mindsets about where I actually fit in this whole like big world thing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And it makes sense so much in terms of like what you've pursued after leaving the humanitarian aid work that you did, which we will get into about how you're, driving impact. But what did that teach you about like humanity? You mentioned about how the type of poverty, people surviving on so little, where you just see the rib cages, like, and the parasitic impacts on the gut, and, just the imagery of poverty that sticks with so many of us, like having seen it in Africa and other places around the world.
It's very in your face. I mean, it's not subliminal. It's just so stark. And I'm an empath, and so it's really hard for me I can't turn away. Like, I can't turn a blind eye. I can't turn and walk away from something like that. It's just not how I'm built. So my natural inclination is to figure out, like, well, what can I do? How can I help? How can I be of service? Feels so lofty, but like, how can I maybe how can I fix this problem? How be a part of the solution?
Yeah. And so, you mentioned about the difficulty of the realization of not being able to change a whole society or change an entire economic structure that people are, unfortunately living under in certain places. So how did you come to terms with that? That like, you can try to make an impact on one person's life, but perhaps their futures may not be as optimistic as one would hope for.
It's an age-old question, right, that really doesn't have any good answers. I think I've always... So it comes down to like the conversation between impact versus intent, right? So my intentions have always been good, but what kind of impact do those intentions create for the person who we are trying to help? And that's like a forever conversation in the development sector and in international aid. I have always kind of been of the mindset that like my responsibility is to not turn away and to do what I can and not necessarily worry about the impact. I realize that doesn't work in every single situation. But just because we can't solve world hunger, does that mean that we don't give the beggar on the street a piece of bread?
Touch
like,
their lives.
Yeah, like I just, and a lot of people don't agree with me that's a good thing to do. It's like that. Well, I always stop on the corner, and if somebody's begging, I always give them money.
Yeah.
And I've had friends say like, well, you don't know what they're going to do with that. And I'm like, that's none of my business.
That is but I agree 100% with that. That is absolutely me as well.
Yeah. There's that conversation of like, well, like maybe that should be your business. And I'm like, it's actually just more important to me that my kids see that I don't ignore pain, and that if I have a buck or $10 in my wallet, that, we don't need whatever it is we were going to, it's just important to live out my beliefs in that way. And so I guess in a nutshell, that's why I went to Africa.
So those beliefs, you mentioned growing up in the church. What church was it? I mean, is it like have a global footprint?
Yeah, I mean, evangelical.
Okay.
So I grew up like very, very evangelical. Went to Christian school all my life, went to Christian university. So, I mean, very, very much enmeshed. It's taken me like a very long time to deconstruct my faith and figure out what works for me and my own version of spirituality and how I want to show up in that space. But yeah, I mean, it was very shame-based, very performative, very traumatizing, really. And it's taken me a whole lot of therapy and a whole lot of time to sort through all of that.
So when you say it was traumatizing, growing up in the church was traumatizing?
Yeah, I think so.
Really? How was it from the evangelical standpoint? Because I always considered evangelical Christians to be like Christian light, compared to, like Orthodox Christianity and Catholicism, obviously. But it sounds like not necessarily, and especially from a child's eyes. So could you talk a little about that?
Like you're just always doing something wrong. Like you're always wrong. You're always going to get in trouble. God's always watching you. You're always asking for forgiveness. I think a lot of this parlayed into my mom and her own unhealed trauma and mental illness that spiraled, for a good portion of my childhood, that was very enmeshed in like church rhetoric. And then, I went on to get married really young, and that was really horrible and traumatizing. And thank God I got out of that. And that was a miracle, I think my version of spirituality and my relationship with God now is the strongest it's ever been my entire life. But that's because I now see that I'm not bad and that I am not intrinsically a failure, and there is no shame attached, that I'm just worthy the way I am. And it's taken me such a long time to understand that and to unpack that, because it really does a number on your self-esteem. And I think there's a lot around not trusting your own intuition and knowing your own voice, because it all belongs to God. And so that's a really hard thing to like figure out and form as you're growing up, especially as a woman in a very conservative environment. And so this has been the lesson of this lifetime for me to learn how to trust myself, and to love myself, because there's really not a lot of self-love. It's all about what God thinks about you, and what God thinks about you is all written in this book that was written like, thousands of years ago by a bunch of dudes, So, I mean, it's really, it seems more like current, I guess, in a way, than like perhaps Catholicism, because that's so steeped in tradition. But it's really, it can be very traumatizing. And I mean, there's a whole lot of us who grew up that way, who are all trying to unpack our mental health and our emotional health as a result of growing up in the Evangelical Church. Believe me.
Wow. I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
Not from an evangelical perspective. And it must take a lot to deconstruct those early childhood experiences and sort of reframe and rewire who you are. And it sounds to me from what you're talking about that like there is an expectation for like you need to fall into this societal norm or expectation. And now you've figured out that, the relationship with God could be one-on-one. And I'd love to expand on that further. Do you feel like now, from your perspective, like you're a mom, do you have an expectation for your children to sort of follow on your spiritual journey, or do you hope that they'll have their own experiences that they'll be able to hopefully, if it's in their path to find God, or like what do you hope to pass on to like a younger generation that is seeking purpose?
Well, I very much believe in purpose. I believe that is what separates us, I think, from like animals, right? Is the sense of purpose, that we are motivated and that drives us to get up in the morning. And so I really hope my kids do. I hope they believe in God. I want them to believe. I want them to have something to trust in. I don't preach that. I model it. And so, they see me every morning. They know exactly where I am. I get up early. I go sit in my chair down in the family room, and I journal, I meditate, I pray, I burn Palo Santo, I pull my tarot cards. I bring all kinds of different practices and rituals into that hour in the morning, but they know exactly what I'm doing and they know why I do it. And I think they can see the impact and the effect of that, because for all intents and purposes, I should not be like walking around with my head on straight. Sometimes I think like people expect me to just be like super crazy after everything I've been through. And I think I'm doing okay, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And I credit a lot of that to like my spiritual connection with God. It's not, I don't want them to feel shame. I don't want them to live in a space where they feel that they're doing something wrong. Yes, of course, we make mistakes, but I don't really actually even believe in mistakes. I just believe in lessons and opportunities to learn.
Yeah.
Which is such a deviation from how I was raised, because it was, spare the rod or spoil the child, like kind of deal. And there was a lot of corporal punishment going on in my house. And my kids ask me about that because they're growing up, or they're going to school with kids from all different, that are from different countries and different religions and different cultural backgrounds. And that came up the other day about one of my daughter's friends said her mom hits her, and we had this whole conversation, childhood in the church and God. And so, and why I don't hit my kids,
Yeah. As the cycle.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just want them to know, I want them to trust themselves, and I want them to trust that the universe has their back, however they want to phrase it. And for me, that's God, but whatever it is for them.
When you mentioned about like corporal punishment and things like that, I mean, were you as a child, did you rebel a lot?
From outside perspectives, no, I did not rebel. I think I always tried to do the right thing, quote unquote. But I'm strong-willed, and I had my opinions about stuff. And my mom and I, we butted heads a lot. I got along really well with my dad for the most part, but my mom had a lot of unhealed trauma. She was an orphan, like by 11 years old, lost her entire family, like a lot of pain in her life that the church didn't help heal. And so that carries on, right? That's generational trauma. And, my family laughs and says that, as in my dad and my siblings, my mom passed away, but that I'm the one who pushed the envelope the most. But I think I've just always kind of done my own thing.
Yeah.
But it's never been drink until after I got out of college. Like, I mean, I wasn't sleeping around. I wasn't doing all the rebellious things that teenagers do. And I went to youth group. I sang in the church choir. Like, I mean,
Sneaking out to go to youth group.
Yeah, I mean, literally, I snuck out once, and it was a youth group sleepover, and we just went to the grocery store to buy a frozen pizza. Like, that's as bad as it got,
Yeah.
So, but I'm sure it was frustrating. I know, come back and get me because I have a tween right now. But, I mean, from my perspective, I think I was a pretty good kid.
Yeah. It's so interesting when you kind of look back at those days and sort of the severity of the response sometimes compared to like, you were just an innocent kid.
Just a kid.
You're just a kid. And, I never understood that. I really never understood that, how people can just have so much anger or like frustration to, one, it just robs a child from the opportunity to experience what they need to. And it takes away that that sort of that wandering spirit, of like the confidence to just say, oh, I wonder what this is like, or have the confidence to curiosity. That's what I think.
That's how I learn. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's so nice that, there's always that one person in the generational lineage that, every few generations or so that they're sort of the black sheep in the family, and they need to break that. And hopefully it leaves future generations with better opportunities and all of that. So you mentioned that you had married young. Was that before you did the international aid work?
Yes. Yeah. That was kind of, I think, in response. I just came this close to being like, stuck and having a very small life. And I always say that God released me from that. It was heartbreaking and horrible and scary and traumatizing in and of itself. It was an abusive relationship. And but I got out. I was super, super young. I'm super lucky, didn't have any kids or anything, and just went back to college, left, got out of Dodge, went to the East Coast, started my life over again at 25. So I wasn't even that old. And that's when then I started, to get my head on straight, because it was like, okay, what do I want now? What do I want? I've got a second chance here. I'm going to get my teaching degree. What do I want to do? Where do I want to go? What do I want to see? How do I want to help? No one else is going to tell me what to do or how to do it. And so, yeah, my whole life I call myself a late bloomer.
Yeah. Well, better late than never. And I love that, that sort of sets you on your path to your purpose. And, you kind of broke away from that bondage of being stuck.
Yeah.
And that is so difficult. And to the people that can break away from their situations, I feel like, that's oftentimes when people start to really discover their purpose, because it's like, who are you? What is it that you want? And so hence, I guess, the first opportunity then to get into the international aid space. So getting to Africa in particular, what is it that you were hoping to achieve? When we talk about those little wins, for example, not being able to change a whole society, but giving a better opportunity to the people's lives that you were able to touch. Is there one experience that sort of stands out as the first time you felt like you were really impacting somebody, the first connection or that first experience that really made you feel like, yes, this is where I'm supposed to be?
Oh man, there are so many. I think back to my first trip, my first experience in Africa. I went to South Sudan. I was with another girl. We were supposed to be going with a group, but the trip dismantled, but we decided to go. She was very experienced. She'd lived and worked in East Africa for years. And so I felt safe going with her. And we were working in an orphanage with recovered child soldiers. And we had brought suitcases of craft supplies with us to donate. We asked the orphanage for a list of needs and wants, and we were able to bring all this stuff with us. And I think just watching kids play with art supplies for the first time was really, that felt gratifying, because it's such a simple thing, right? Crayons and paper. But I remember they didn't know what to do with glitter, so they started eating it. And, we had to be no, you don't eat it. Here, show them what to do. Yeah. Stuff like that. Just really basic. And then it would continue to evolve into just formal teaching and what that was like, working with students from all over the world with various types of needs, very different kind of setting. And then moving into the work that I did for DDG, and that was quantifiable. We had numbers to show how many people were helped through mine clearance or through community safety education, or creating gun clamps and helping them fit them on their AK-47 so kids weren't getting shot. That some days feel like nothing was happening and no good was taking place. But then when you would look at the stats and the numbers, it felt like, oh, okay, there's a reason why I'm here and why I'm doing this work. And I think it actually matters.
Yeah, indeed it does. What were some of the most difficult things you've come across before the abduction? Did you come across somebody getting injured by a landmine or anything.
Yeah, I mean, we saw things like that in communities all the time. People, their limbs would be blown off. They'd be killed. I mean, there were always stories. A lot of the stories were about armed violence. We did a lot of armed violence reduction education. Almost every household in Somaliland, in Somalia, had an AK-47, had some sort of weapon. The most heartbreaking stories were when you heard about kids getting shot and dying because they were playing with a weapon that hadn't been properly stored. That's so preventable and so heartbreaking. I mean, we have stories like that here in the US, right?
Yeah.
It's an issue here. But it just felt so unnecessary.
Were you very like transactional and like mission focused and like, okay, I was able to achieve these numbers in this month, for example, or did you ever feel like I wish I'd gotten there to that village to be able to have made an impact before?
No, I don't think so. Not necessarily, because we weren't doing like emergency relief. I think if I were working with, in the medical field, or if we were handing out emergency food aid, that would have been a different story. But because the work we were doing was more education focused, it didn't feel necessarily so time sensitive. And my job really was to work with our staff and train them. And so building those relationships was really important to my job and really important to me personally. And as I was able to do that, then I always felt like, okay, like I was able to do my job in a good way. This is sustainable. This is exciting. And then to be out in the field and to be out and watch them do their trainings and to build capacity. And I think one of like my most memorable moments in terms of making an impact was just even being able to go out into the field and see how they were conducting these trainings, which was completely inappropriate for a non-literate people group who is nomadic. They were using flip charts and writing in English. And I was like, why? Like, this doesn't make any sense. These people don't read. It's just they're camel herders, and that's perfectly fine. So we need to meet them where they're at and figure out a way to communicate this life-saving information in a way that makes sense to them, instead of basically paying them to show up at these like community meetings where none of this is making any sense. And so that's really where I felt good about the fact that I had these skills, these pedagogical skills and this education background to bring into this organization that had never brought in an actual teacher to figure out how to relate to their beneficiaries in the best way possible. And the fact that we were making progress and that my ideas were sticking and that my team really enjoyed the creative process felt awesome.
That's great. That is so fulfilling for sure. And so for a lot of the viewers and listeners that might not understand why there are landmines there in the first place, could you give a little bit of the backstory, and then also perhaps like some of the improvement that's been made because of people like yourself?
Sure. So in countries like Somalia, and when I talk about Somaliland, I'm talking about northern Somalia, right? Somalia, for the audience, it's kind of shaped like a number 7. So it at the time it was divided into three regions, and one of them, northern Somalia or Somaliland, was self-declared autonomous region. And so they were really campaigning for independence from Somalia. And so I think they consider the fact that they have it. I'm not sure that they're recognized as an autonomous country, Somaliland, but at the time, that's how they operated. And so, but before you can get to that point, you imagine there's civil war. And so a lot of these communities were even 10, 20 years post-Civil War, but there were landmines left over, UXOs, IEDs things that had not exploded but were still littering outside communities and making them uninhabitable and making them impassable. Again, in Somalia, you're talking about nomadic people groups who migrate based on the weather patterns and their animals' needs. And so to not be able to move through certain areas is extremely problematic for their herds. And so what we did as there were two demining groups based in Hargeisa, Halo Trust, which is based out of the UK, and then the Danish Demining Group, which is the mine action unit of the Danish Refugee Council. And so Halo actually did most of the clearing, big clearing. They had lots of equipment and lots of guys that came out and did all that work. And then we were more in the education space and in the armed violence reductions, doing a lot of work and capacity building. We did do some clearance, and really what we focused on was destroying stockpiles. So going into communities, building trust and relationship, because a lot of these communities, which I think makes a lot of sense, they were suspicious. Like, who are these organizations, and why do they want my stockpile of unexploded ordinances that I've been keeping under my kitchen table for like 5 years because I think they might be worth something, or I might need them in case another civil war breaks out. So education and building trust was really important. Sometimes those IEDs would go off in the houses where you got babies sleeping. So trying to just communicate to them what they actually were, and actually, they're not worth anything. Of course, we as outsiders couldn't guarantee that there wasn't a civil war that was imminent, but we did our best to mitigate any more conflict by teaching inter and intrapersonal skills, relationship skills, active listening, that kind of thing. And so, I don't have the stats on me. It's been a long time since I've worked there, but
did you feel it was effective?
I did. Yeah. I did. I mean, it's soft skills, right?
Yeah.
And again, I think when people think about aid work or development work, it's about handing out food, or how many kids saved from dying from malaria or whatever. So it's different, but it's still quantifiable, and it's still very important.
Yeah. So the soft skills that you mentioned, I'd love to go a little deeper on your ability and the skill set of actually building trust. You were there for the right intentions. You wanted to, make this community better and safer for the people living there and future generations. How were you able to overcome language barriers, cultural barriers, and then really establish trust with the community that you were in?
Boy, that's a big question. We worked with national staff. I mean, they were leading the way. We were there to help facilitate whatever they needed, but it was their ideas. It was them going into the communities. Of course, they knew the organizations were backing them, but I was the education advisor, but I had my deputy, Fatima. She was amazing, and she was the one who went in and did all the work and then brought me feedback. Here's what they want. Here's what they need. Here's what I think we should do. And then I just facilitated making sure we could pay for it, making sure we could produce whatever it was that they needed and wanted. And, of course, I had the education background to create workbooks and use, we did cool things like employed local artists. And then we employed a local printer so that we could make these workbooks that were all illustrated through Somali artists. And we were working with community of artists. So we were supporting and building trust in that way. It was across sectors. It was really about building relationships all over the community, so that we were recognized as an organization really wanted to be there, not to take over, but to help support as they built their own infrastructure the way they wanted to do it. And I think that's how development should work, until you work yourself out of a job and need you more.
Right. With DDG, how large was the office that you guys had there?
Oh, it was pretty big. I mean, there were, at the time in 2011, we were how many were we? I think we were maybe 5 or 6 expats, but they were roving too because they did a lot of training. And then we probably had somewhere between 30 and 50 national staff. So it's a big office.
With that is economic empowerment. People are employed, and that tends to also spread the word. I've noticed, at least with a lot of the international aid work, when it's benefiting the local community, people that feed into those families will protect it. Did you start to feel at some point while you were there that, your intuition is kind of like something's like maybe the energy, something you just start picking up after a while?
Well, I think intrinsically I knew something bad was about to happen. I was feeling really burned out. I needed a break. Like, I needed a good long break. I'd been working there for about 3 years. And I took like R&Rs and all of that. My husband was there and he was working for a different organization. I work, and this is how I am. I move in 3-year cycles. And so I go hard. I go all in, everything I've got, 190 miles an hour. I can do that for about 3 years. And then I hit a wall and it's like, okay, it's time to rest. It's time to recoup and regenerate, and then I'll start something new. And I've realized, like, in my 25 years as like a working adult, this is my cycle. And I'm like in my 3-year, like, moving into rest, regeneration right now. So it's interesting to be aware of all of that. But it was manifesting as fear. I had just lost my mom. She died suddenly in 2010. I was home on a 2-week leave back in Virginia. My parents had just moved there from the Midwest, actually, as like their retirement spot. And I came back for 2 weeks to visit, and she died. She had a heart attack. She was only 57. So just like none of us saw it coming, and she was just gone. And so while our relationship was complicated, I mean, it was horrific and so hard. And so I stayed in the States for a couple of months to help my younger brother and my dad get kind of resettled and figure out what they were doing. And then I went back to Somaliland and tried to pick up where I left off, but it was really hard. I was grieving. I started feeling like scared all the time, kind of like paranoid in a way, like something bad is going to happen. And so I kept thinking, like, this has to be a direct result of losing my mom, right? So I kept trying to like keep things in perspective, but I have this very vivid memory of going downtown Hargeisa with Eric. He needed to like go to the bank or something, or like it wasn't a bank, it was like money wiring service. And he left me in the car, and I just had this overwhelming fear of there being like a suicide bomber or something in the street, because it was busy. It was like 6 o'clock after the last call to prayer, and everybody was starting to come out, and I just kept seeing this happen, like my life my life ending. Like, I just felt very afraid that something bad was going to happen to me and I was going to die. And I kept saying to him, like, I need to get out of here. Like, I need to do something else. And he was just kind of like, okay, sure. Like, okay, like, let's figure it out. But we kind of have to keep working. We have contracts, all of this. And so I think I probably just dismissed it as part of my grief.
Yeah.
But I know now that my intuition knew something bad was headed my way, and it was trying to keep me safe and trying to get me out of there.
There's nothing stronger than one's intuition, right?
Yeah. I know that now.
Yeah. And I've really come as well to just really trust it. Just when I have that feeling, I feel like it's like, your mind is picking up on social cues that we try to perhaps talk ourselves out of, where, then your conscious brain is like, oh, no, it can't be that. And if you're analytical, you try to talk yourself out of it or something. And you're not always right.
No, exactly.
And I'll never blame it. I'm curious, from the international aid space, you were working with the Danes. And so did they have like sort of that culture of knowing surveillance detection? Did you guys get any type of training in that sense?
So I attended probably, I would say, like less than a year before my incident. They did an internal version of a heat training, right? Hostile environmental awareness training. A lot of organizations outsource that to security groups. And I've done a lot of work post-incident with organizations or companies to share my story as a cautionary tale. But this was put on by our security advisor, who was based out of Nairobi. And, it was fine. I mean, I spent a lot of time learning how to stop a wound with compression and first aid. And I do remember them doing some sort of kidnapping reenactment kind of thing, thinking, that's weird, but nothing too intense. I'm not sure that I needed to be tested to get certified in anything. It was just kind of checking it off the list of things that they need for us.
Yeah.
But that's really all I got. There was not much in terms of support or education around safety.
Hopefully more will be invested into that space, because international aid workers really are exposed to so much, and sometimes it comes from within, inside, with insider threats. Yeah. So let's work our way into what happened. So at this point, you had this hunch of something terrible was going to happen. And then you stayed for a little bit longer. Were you making plans to leave? What were your next steps, after this discomfort?
So, I just tried to push it down because, again, I loved my job. I didn't want to leave my husband and have a long distance relationship. And what was it? You can't just go to a country like Kenya and decide you're going to live there. You need to have visas, you need to have work permits, that whole thing. So I was kind of stuck. I was kind of in a bit of a challenging situation. I needed to have a job. And so I'm carrying on. I'm doing my thing. Still, grieving the loss of my mom. So there's a lot going on for me emotionally. And then we had a program that was based in Galcayo, Somalia. So on that 7 shape down here at the bottom, north of Mogadishu, which is what most people are familiar with when they think of Somalia. There was a Danish gentleman named Poul Thisted that I was good friends with. He had been based in Hargeisa, double my age, my dad's age, but we, you hang out with all kinds of people here in the field, and a good friend. And he was the project manager down there, and I was technically in charge of training his education staff. And that was part of my portfolio and part of my responsibility. And he wanted me to come down to Galcayo to do the training. And we had planned it a couple of times, and I had canceled on him because there were genuine security threats. A bus full of women and children had been blown up by an opposing clan. Yes, we're not the target, but still, I don't want to get caught in the crossfire or something like that. So the third time we scheduled it's a couple days out, and I am just not feeling good. I do not want to go down and do this. I just don't want to go down there and do it. I can't explain why, other than I really don't want to. I don't feel good about it. I don't want to go down there. His team is great, but I'm let's bring them up to Hargeisa. Let's get them out in Galcayo. Part of the issue was we had 2 separate offices, one in the north part of the city and one in the southern part of the city, because they belonged to these opposing, each to their own clan, and they couldn't cross over the boundary.
Right.
So if you belong, I don't remember the clan names, unfortunately, but if you belong to the clan that, governed the north, you couldn't cross over into the south. So we had to do everything separately because we had separate headquarters, separate offices, separate teams. We even had to have separate convoys of vehicles because they couldn't cross over. So, it just seemed easier to bring everybody up to Hargeisa, but he was nope, this is this is our job. This is what we've been, commissioned to do. If you can't do this, then I'm going to report you to our supervisor and tell them that you're not getting your job done, essentially is what he said. And I got off the phone and I'm like, okay, what's the worst that can happen? I go talk to Eric. Again, he's been working in this region. He worked all over Somalia. I mean, technically, he's right. Like, this is your job. This is what you signed on for. So, I mean, if you're not going to do it, I guess they are going to find somebody else who will. And, and I'm working in a very male-dominated environment. I do not have military or, security background. I'm a teacher, for God's sake. So I don't have a professional background that equips me to really be able to identify unsafe environments, or basically to really trust my intuition outside of just being a person who does that, if you know what I mean. And so I'm completely 100% dependent on my colleagues and on my security advisor to guarantee my safety. I don't feel equipped to make that call myself because I don't have the professional background to be able to make that call. That's not really my job. And so I go through the security protocols. The security advisor, who's based in Nairobi, says, I remember the email, one line, yep, good to go. So, he supposedly has gone through all the necessary protocols and checked all of the different channels to make sure, that it's safe to go down there. And so I get on the UN plane, I go down there. We had the training's 3 days. The first 2 days are fine because I'm staying in the North office. I just have to walk downstairs and I'm not leaving the compound. And what I did learn in that heat training is that it's when you're in transit that you're really vulnerable.
Yes.
And that's really what I was worried about, was trying to get over that green line, get in another convoy of vehicles, and then being taken to the other the office in the south of the city. And so October 25th, 2011, I got up in the morning. I hadn't slept well. I'd had all these weird dreams all night long.
Was that typical?
No, I'm not. I've started dreaming more now at this point in my life. Not sure what that's about, but I am not a prolific dreamer. I do not dream. I know we all do.
Yeah.
In theory, but I don't remember them. This was very clear. Because I'll never forget, the first day I get there, I walk upstairs to the guest house, which was the second floor of this big house on this compound. And Paul is there to welcome me. And he points to the veranda and says, I wouldn't sit out there because see that house? And there was a house maybe I don't know, I'm not good with distances, but it was close enough that I could make out details on the house. It was not far away. He said that's supposed to be a pirate den. Apparently it's full of pirates, and whenever they get payment for something, they shoot their firearms off, and sometimes the bullets come whizzing by. And so don't sit out on the veranda so you don't get hit by a flyby bullet. And I put my suitcase down and I looked at him and I said, what do you mean there are pirates? What are you talking about? And I'm I kind of feel like it would have been important for me to know that there's a den of pirates over here in a house next to our office. I feel like that's important information.
I'm just surprised that your security advisor wouldn't have given you a briefing beforehand.
No briefing.
No briefing. Just a one line, you're good to go. And then you need to know about tribal disputes. And for everybody listening, this isn't you're driving down some highway to go to whatever. These are dirt roads. It's not common for people to be driving in between regions. It's not a ton of traffic, and so people will know when you're on the road. And that's why, the transit is such a vulnerable time and place,
right,
because
you're very visible.
Exactly. And then, typically protocols are, you would get a briefing beforehand of like, these are the potential family disputes and tribal disputes that you need to be aware of. Here's a list of like the last 90 days of incidents on a micro level. Here's the macro view. And then also, of course, what are the groups that you need to be concerned of? How do you identify them? Do do pirates look like Al-Qaeda? Do they look like this? What are they carrying? None of it. You got
nothing. None of it.
Do you think? And was this like a UN subcontract, or it sounds like you took a UN plane to get there, right?
Yeah, well, we did that a lot. I'm sure we had funding from the UN. I know our biggest contributors were obviously the Danish government and like the UK DFID at the time. So, I think it's important for people to understand that I wasn't working for some like tiny little NGO that was like going around to churches trying to raise money. I mean, this organization was the biggest organization funded by the Danish government, which I realize Denmark is not a big country, but they're
pocketed.
Yeah, and they're very well recognized and highly regarded in the context of international development and aid. So I'm not out there just like freelancing it on my own. Like they sent me there.
Just no innocent American, like thinks they're gonna do great in the world.
That is not. I mean, I may have started out like that. That is not where I was at. Like, the only briefing. I mean, I'm sure I had some information based off of like UN reports that I could access on my own. But they grade the security threat. At the time, I don't know what it is now, but I think it was like on the 3rd level, and there were only 4. So I mean, and they like to try to tell me I knew what I was going into, but I didn't. And we'll get to that in a few minutes because there was other information that was revealed to me later on. But yeah, I walk in and I'm like, okay, well, I won't sit on the veranda because I don't want to get hit by a stray bullet from the pirate den that is literally within a stone's throw of why on earth have a project base.
Don't worry, it's a pirate safe house.
And I mean, is it a joke? Is it not? I don't know. But that lodged into my head, which then perpetuated these nightmares that I had all night about our compound being stormed by these pirates. And so I wake up at like 5 a.m., with the call to prayer. I get up, I drag myself to the bathroom, and I remember looking at myself in the mirror saying to myself out loud, do you want to do this? And I knew the answer. No, I don't want to do this. I do not want to leave the compound and go to the South office because I'm scared. I'm scared something bad is going to happen. But then it was like, I'm here. You can pragmatize your way out of anything, right? I'm here. They're expecting me. They're relying on me. What am I going to go tell Paul that I'm afraid? I don't want anybody to know I'm afraid. I think more than anything, that's what I didn't want. I felt so like pressured to be this like strong woman who was like up against all these men essentially. And I just always felt like everybody was waiting for me to fail, especially my boss's boss, because he was just not nice to me and he didn't like me and he didn't want me in this position. And I felt like I was constantly fighting for my right to be there. And so this, I didn't know what to do other than to just dismiss my own self and tell myself that I was being paranoid and do it and just get in the car and just freaking do it. Get it over with. It'll be fine. This is, how I was talking to myself, like just stop being such a baby and do it. And then I walked out of the room into a completely different life.
I'm curious, before we get into, the actual moment that you were kidnapped, what did you know about Somali pirates? What did you know about the threat of, I know you didn't know that they were there, but did you understand the economics of piracy?
I think as much as like a teacher can understand that, right? I think a couple of weeks before this, I was in Nairobi. I remember, I think I must have been on R&R and my husband was there at the same time. And I have this very clear memory of walking down the stairs, and I have my phone, my laptop, and my iPad, and I'm doing 3 different things. I'm like talking to 3 different people. Work was crazy. I was just like so into my day to day, right? Like how we all are. And he comes out of, I don't know, the office, and he says, "Oh my God, 2 Spanish girls were just abducted from Dadaab, which is a huge refugee camp on the border of Kenya and Somalia." And he said they think it's like pirates, like a piracy thing. And I remember being like, "Oh, wow, that's terrible. What a shame." And then just like going on about my business. And he was like really bothered about it. And, of course, there's conversation in the expat community and the development aid worker community about like, what does this mean? And I'm sure there were some like standard notices issued from our security advisor and stuff. But I think I'd heard about pirates, and of course, Captain Phillips had happened before. And then there were those 4 Americans that were taken on their sailboat off the coast of Oman. So all of this was happening around the same time, within a year. And so it's like in your periphery, right? But not anything that you ever think you're going to like come into contact with. So yes, I understood that piracy was a result of the Indian Oceans being overfished, and these are quote unquote commercial fishermen who are taking back their water, and it's I don't know, I guess a result of what am I trying to say? Standing up for themselves and their communities and all of that. I understood, but a lot of people were dying.
Yeah.
It was becoming very, very tragic, and the American military kept getting involved, and so it was a lot. But not anything I felt like I needed to be concerned with.
I'd love if you could then take us to the day that, you get into the car for the movement, and, if you could, I know it's difficult, but just walking through what happened on that day.
So it's October 25th, 2011. I have this very meaningful conversation with myself and decide to ignore what I'm feeling. And we get into a convoy of land cruisers to take us to the Green Line, where we will then exit the vehicles, walk over by foot to get into on the southern side of the Green Line. And then we'll get into a separate convoy of land cruisers that will take us to the field office, where we'll do the staff training. So we get across with no issue, get to the field office. My team's waiting there for me. We have a great day of training. We worked from 9 to 3. And I remember having they had a big spread of lunch, which was like goat and rice and some things that I didn't necessarily want to partake in. And so I was just like, you know what, I think I'll wait until we get back to the guest house before I eat. And we're waiting for the convoy to come back and pick us up. And there's a local security guy named Abdi-Razak who's in charge of the convoy and coordinating the pickup. And he keeps getting on the phone and getting off and saying, "Oh, it's time to go. Nope, they're not here yet. Oh, wait. It's like it fits and starts. And I think it's weird, but I don't know. You're like there's always something, in these kind of environments. And so I didn't think much of it. And finally the convoy comes in and there are armed guards in the front, armed guards in the back vehicle. And then Paul and I get into the middle. Abdi-Razak gets in actually with us, and he's going to ride with us to the line, and he's in the back seat with me. And there's a driver, a young guy. I don't recognize him. He was the driver that we'd had that morning, but it didn't really matter to me either. That didn't seem abnormal. So we start pulling through the gates of the compound, and we're driving through town, which, to paint a picture, it's narrow streets, kind of dirt roads, like sort of gravel, a little bit of asphalt. You've got people milling around. kids running, dogs, goats, the whole thing. And then it was unusual because this other Land Cruiser comes up really quickly on our right side and like veers around and cuts us off so we can't proceed. And it had been raining, and so there splashes mud up all over the windshield. And I looked up. I was doing something on my phone, like sending an email, and I said to the car, "What a jerk who drives like that!" And then I hear the crack of the butt of an AK-47 on the car hood, and it sounds like we're being surrounded by very angry men, like yelling in Somali. And I'm thinking, like, okay, like what? Like, I don't understand what's happening, what's going on here. And then Abdi Razak, who's sitting on my right side, his door is pulled open, and there's a he looks very angry man dressed in a police uniform. He's got an AK. He pulls Abdi Razak out of his seatbelt, which was kind of a feat, right, to pull somebody so hard out of their seatbelt, and slams him to the ground and hits him in the head with the butt of his AK. And I remember feeling sorry for him, like thinking, oh my God, like, is he okay? And then the guy gets in the where Abdi Razak is sitting, and he puts the gun to my head and he starts screaming at the driver to drive. And Paul's in the front, and this driver just takes off, like just tears off. And I mean, we're like going so fast in through this city of Galcayo, which is not an easy thing. But I mean, on some points we're like up on two wheels, and then the vehicle slams down, and then I mean, Paul's like begging the driver, stop, like slow down. I remember him saying, "You're gonna kill us. You're gonna kill all of us. We're all gonna die if you don't slow down." And then he gets to the edge of town, and we're driving, like we're driving south, and I can't really process like mentally anything. I can't make any kind of assumptions on like what is happening. I can't, you know what I mean? Like my brain doesn't feel like it's working, so I can't figure anything out. And all I can
like that fight or flight.
Yeah, I'm in like freeze mode, I think, and all I can think is, this is so bad. This is so bad. This is so bad. Like, I mean, it's just like I don't have anything to access or use as a reference. I'm trying to think of like a movie that I've seen or a book that I've read or some training that I've taken, and like there's nothing I've ever been exposed to that is going to help me in this like particular scenario, because I have no idea what's happening. And then all I keep thinking after that is like, my life has changed forever from this point. I realized that from that. Even if they like stopped and I thought, okay, well, maybe they're just going to take all of our stuff and kick us out, right? Like that would happen in Nairobi all the time. Like people get carjacked. So I'm thinking maybe we're being carjacked, right? But even then, like even if we were just being carjacked, then things are still like never going to be the same again, like for me. And it would take, I don't know how long in my memory. It feels like it took hours before Paul turned around to look at me, but probably in reality, it was just a few minutes. But I remember mouthing to him, "What's happening?" And he looked at me because he realized I hadn't put two and two together yet. And he just goes, "We're being kidnapped." And I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm going to have a panic attack. Like I'm going to start hyperventilating right here, right now. I'm going to literally like just, I can't breathe. Like I'm going to start freaking out. And this guy is sitting next to me. He tells us his name is Ali. He wants all my stuff. He wants my wallet. He wants my jewelry. He wants our sat phones, everything. And we just drive. And we drive and we drive and we drive and we stop. We were forced out of the vehicle to get into a whole different convoy of vehicles. Then we drive and we drive and then we stop, and then different people get in the vehicles. I mean, it's just like a circus. And this goes on for hours. And this is not like hours in your perception of time. This was an actual taking place for hours. The coordination of this and the complexity of your kidnapping. Yeah.
The number of handoffs.
Yes. Yes. And I don't know how many handoffs there were. I don't know how many vehicles we got into, because again, I'm like in shock. I do remember very clearly at one point hearing a high-pitched voice behind me and turning around and realizing that it was a little kid. And he was wearing like bands of ammo, and he had an AK-47. And I, like, the irony of, like, this is what, I guess, my interest and curiosity and my, like, empathy for these child soldiers is what brought me to Africa in the first place. And here is one. And I'm being kidnapped by one.
How do you deal with that irony?
He was really hard to deal with. That was really, really difficult. One, because like a couple, like maybe a week or so into the kidnapping, he came out of, I don't know, like if he'd gone, I don't know where he had been, but he came back to camp, and I noticed he was wearing a red silicone bracelet around his wrist. And once he got closer to me, I realized it was one that I had designed, and it was a bracelet that we distributed. So he was part of the community that we were working in. He was one of the kids that we had been like developing materials for, and we had given them, like, he had all of the free stuff that we gave away. Like, this was the community that we had been working in, and I felt really betrayed. And then I also just felt this sense of overwhelming, like, probably purposelessness of like, what's the point of all of this? Like, I had to really work through all of that, you know, and I did. I didn't feel that way after a while, but I had to work through it. Like, and it's not like a, well, no one cares about me kind of thing, because, you know, whatever, who am I? It doesn't matter. But you spend all this time making what you think are connections and building community like you think you are. And it just all felt like, I just felt so stupid. Like, oh, yeah, you, like, none of this actually matters. I don't think any of this matters at all. Like, I don't think it matters to you. I don't think it matters to the organization. I don't think any of this matters at all. And here I put my life on the line. And then I felt taken for granted by my organization and taken advantage of by the beneficiaries. Here I am, like, working really hard to do, again, what I felt was the right thing to be. Actually, then I think that is an important conversation to have. And you're just like sitting there in the middle of the desert with guns to your head, realizing, actually, I don't think any of it mattered to anybody. And that is a really sad place to be in.
Absolutely. Yeah, it must have been so difficult to come to that, or, you know, even if just momentarily have that realization. And, you know, as you pointed to, the irony of all of this, it's just mind-boggling to me to know that he was wearing the band that you had designed. That's, in a weird way, though, I just kind of wonder about, like, those moments of, like, you know, you noticing those things of, like, really evaluating your purpose and your value and all of that. I would like to go back to, you know, the moments of your capture. So it was you and the other, your Danish your coworker. Did you recognize anybody else? I mean, you mentioned there was Ollie. You just caught onto his name.
He introduced himself to us.
Oh,
yes. After, you know, he did weird things, like he and Paul got into this like altercation over a Bic pen, like he had a pen in his pocket and wouldn't give it to him, and Ollie wanted the pen and Paul wouldn't give it to him. I'm like, just give him the effing pen. Like, who cares? It's a 50-cent pen. Give him the pen. It was stuff like that, right? And then he like piece by piece dismantled the pen and threw each piece out the window as we were driving and just stared at Paul as if, his message was, I'm going to tear you limb from limb. It just like the mental like torture started right then. I remember him taking his flip phone out of his pocket and taking a picture of the sunset as the sun was setting, just like weird stuff like that. And we didn't know anybody. We didn't know who they were. I think that was the other thing that we were trying to ascertain, like very quickly, like, is this an ideological thing? Is this Al-Shabaab? Like, if this is Al-Shabaab, then we're toast. Like, we're not going to survive this. Especially me as an American woman, I just felt so scared. And then, that night, we drove for hours. I don't know what time we stopped. I would imagine it was probably somewhere around 2 or 3 in the morning. And then they forced us out of the vehicles and commanded us to walk into the desert. And that was probably the most terrifying moment of the whole thing, because I didn't know what was going to happen out there, but I had a pretty good idea that it wasn't going to be good. My fear was that they were going to assault me and then kill me. And then it's hard to like, I can't describe the fear. Like, I don't know how to, I don't have words for it. It's terrifying to think that this, like, it felt like a death march, like, as we're walking, and I don't know how long we walked. It felt like a very long time. I don't know how reliable my memory is, but because I was just like in absolute shock and terror. But in my memory, it feels like there were more and more men just coming. Darkness, and we were just being surrounded by more and more people, lots of weapons, lots of ammunition. And then at some point, they order us to get down on our knees. And I think that, wow, this is it. Like, I think everybody probably wonders, like, how am I going to die? Like, what's that moment going to be like? And I'm like, this is actually it. Like, this is how I'm going to die, out here basically alone in the desert, executed by this group of men. And I don't know what I did. Like, I don't know what I did to deserve this. I don't know what I did to make them so angry. Why they're so mad at me. Like, this is it. And then as I'm waiting, and I'm also very cognizant of like these thoughts of like, is this going to hurt? Like, how bad is it going to hurt? I'm scared of pain. Like, I think we're all afraid of pain. Like, just like all of the most weird random things. And then one of them just says, sleep. And I'm like, I think, you're thinking like, oh, I must have made that up.
Yeah.
But no, one of them says sleep, and they want us to just like, he motions like that to the ground, like lay down and go to sleep. I'm thinking, oh my God. Okay. And so next thing I know, I'm laying face down in the dirt, and I fall asleep. And I wake up a couple hours later, it's starting to get light. And then it all starts coming crashing down on me of like, oh, that wasn't just like the most vivid nightmare, that I actually woke up in hell. And this is not good. This is not good.
Wow, Jess, there's so much to unpack there. When you were talking about Paul and it's interesting to me, like what your brain picks up on, what one's brain picks up on, whether it be the band on the child, and later that Bic pen seemed like an attempt for control of the situation. And it's like that was so symbolic of loss of control.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing that you can do.
Mm-hmm.
And then you imagining what could potentially happen is just as difficult as going through it, because your mind is just taking you to like the worst possible scenario. And so, the fear factor of seeing men, not having the language skills, not having any like reassurance of it feeling like it's going to be okay or anything on the other end of this, is exactly, to your words, like that death march. And I can't imagine how one would grapple with that feeling. And something else you said that kind of gave me chills, to be honest, was, what did I do to deserve this? It's like that, your child, like your child inside of you, what you grew up with, and like the church, like, making it like everything that is a result of like something you did wrong.
Yeah.
But actually you were completely innocent in a situation where you were trying to do good. And here you were suffering at the hands of the people that you came to help. How, that night when you slept, and you wake up the next morning in utter despair, how did you prepare your body physically?
It's interesting what like pops out of your mouth. If you don't, it's not really like prepared. I do think that this helped. I don't have any reason to, I don't have any way of proving it, but I don't know how, we were a couple nights into captivity, and they moved us around a lot, especially in the beginning. We would like drive for hours, especially in the middle of the night. And there was this one particular stint where it felt like we were being chased, or we were like trying to get away from something or someone. And so it felt very charged and very stressful. And I kept hearing them say American. I don't speak Somali. I mean, I could like, get through a couple of sentences, and, hearing American over and over again made me feel really freaked out, because I had no idea where we were going or what they were going to do. And also there was always this fear that they were going to sell me to Al-Shabaab, because they would tell me that, like, if your people can't come up with the money, essentially, then we can sell you to Al-Shabaab for $5 million tomorrow. And so I had no reason not to believe that was a reality. But a couple nights into the whole ordeal, I asked them to stop the car because I was going to be sick. I felt so panicked that I was going to throw up. I get out of the car, I start throwing up. And the leader of the group, a man who identified himself as Abdi, he got out of the car, I guess, to stand there and just watch me throw up, which is so undignified. And he asked me nicely if I needed anything. Did I want some milk or did I want some meat? And I said, no. I said, can anybody get me a Sprite? And he said, no one has Sprite. And I was like, okay, well, milk or meat doesn't sound good to me, is what I'm thinking as I'm retching on the side of the road. And then he says to me, do you have any children? And I say, yes, one. I have a son. His name is Smulan. And he tells me he has children and whatnot. And so Smulan was my dog. I had found this little puppy dying underneath a Land Cruiser when I was down at the printer one day. And these kids were throwing rocks at him and torturing him. And my mom loved animals. And so it was right after I'd gotten back, after she died. And I picked this little guy. I went back to the office, but I couldn't stop thinking about him. So I made the driver take me back, and he was still there, and he was half dead. And I picked him up in my headscarf, and I took him home, and he was covered in worms and parasites and so disgusting. And I just thought I wanted to bring him home so he could die with some dignity, and I was planning on just burying him on the compound. But we cleaned him up, and he got better, and he lived, and he was so important to me in that time in my life. But we named him Smulan, which in Swedish, my husband's Swedish, means like, it was a description for what he looked like when we brought him home, just like a total mess. And he was the most, he was the most intuitive, interesting, curious thing he wasn't even a dog. It was so interesting. So I think like subconsciously I was thinking that if they tried to use my child as leverage for ransom somehow, like, because your mind is like coming up with all these like possible scenarios that probably you've seen on TV or something, because like whoever thinks to prepare for something like this. And I thought, okay, well, Eric will know that I'm talking about, he'll say, yes, we have a kid, because they'll hear the name Smulan. I mean, this is all ridiculous, but this is what I'm thinking. So
it's smart, actually.
Well, it is smart because then I went from, and you know, I was older. I was 31 so in Somali culture, like that's old. Like I was an old woman. So I think if they were going to rape me, it was just to hurt me and to put pressure on negotiations, not because, you know, they liked young girls, like 15-year-old girls.
Did you know that?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
But I was still afraid.
Of course.
And then the fact that I put myself in this, like, I tried to like re-identify myself as a mother, because mothers have a lot of clout in Somali culture, that I knew. And so they're very respected. And so I thought if I can get them to look at me as a mother and think about my son and all of that, maybe that will somehow help. I don't know. And I don't know if it helps, but you know, they would ask me if I got to talk to my baby on the phone, and I would start crying and say, yes, baby.
Yeah.
But, you know, like this whole thing, you know, turned into something. And then, of course, like I cannot deny that there's a God, because, you know, then I got pregnant with my son 3 days after the rescue.
Oh my God. So, and it really humanized you, you know?
I think so.
Yeah. I think it was really smart for you to, you know, make that connection and be able to have the cultural intelligence to be able to know that would put you in a sort of a revered position. You know, they always say the first 24 hours are the most important.
That was like probably the first week. The first 24 hours was just about sheer survival, like just trying not to get shot. I was not saying anything. Paul and I weren't talking. Like, I mean, we were just like looking out of the sides of our eyes, trying not to make eye contact. I remember it started raining. It was the rainy season. So, you know, you get like afternoon rains, and we were sitting on all we had was a mat, like with those plastic mats, you know? And so we like rolled it up over us so we could try to, because it was like a heavy downpour. And when the rain stopped, you know, we're drenched, and we knocked the top of the mat off, and there was literally like this microphone, like there was a machine gun barrel this close to my head. And I just looked up, and then I'm like looking at the barrel. I didn't know it was there. And then I look up, and we're surrounded by all of these guys and these guns. And I'm thinking, oh my God, like is this what it's going to be like? And so, you know, I think we just kept waiting for what was going to happen. Are we going to be taken to a house? Are we going to be taken to a building of some sort? Are they going to throw us in a hole? Like, you know, are they going to kill us? Like, that's trying to just staying alive through those first 24 hours felt like a massive victory. And then, okay, let's try to stay alive for another 24 hours. If we can make it through 48 hours without getting killed, then maybe they're not going to kill us. And then I remember, you know, like just basically, you know, no one would answer any questions we had. We were basically just like off to the side of the camp, and Abdi came over one night before we went to bed, it was like dusk, is probably like 4 or 5 nights in, and we asked him point blank, "Are you going to kill us?" And he said, no, we just want money. We just want money. That was a huge relief until I found out that the ransom demand was $45 million.
$45 million. My God. And so how did you find that out? And what was the gut feeling at that point?
They kept telling us they were waiting for a translator, and we thought that they had gotten the word wrong and they meant negotiator, because I didn't know how this whole thing worked and that it would happen outside of us. But they really indeed were just waiting for this guy to come up from Mogadishu who spoke English. His name was Jibril. He was an older Somali guy. He spoke pretty good English. He said he was not a part of the pirates. He had an NGO in Mogadishu, and he was just there to translate. That's not true at all, but that's what he was telling us. I mean, it felt like a good 7 to 10 days that we had to wait for him. And he then told us, okay, we're going to go make a proof of life call. And this is what they're asking for. They're asking for $45 million. And I think my stomach just sank. I was like, we're not ships. Like, we're not cargo ships with a whole crew.
Yeah.
We're 2 aid workers. No one cares about us. Like,
and that obviously sounded absurd to you. But then, what were the expectations? Was it that your organization would pay? Was the expectation that your family would pay? Like, what did you think the next line of action was going to be?
So I, for some reason, had information that I probably shouldn't have had. I knew that my organization had kidnapping and ransom insurance, which is not something that's openly talked about.
Correct.
Right? That's a security risk.
Yeah.
I don't know how I knew that. Somebody must have just told me that at some point. And so that helped me feel a little bit better. But I seemed to have I had a better grasp on reality than Paul did, because we were moving into the holidays, right? So for me, Thanksgiving and then Christmas, and Paul would say they can't make us sit out. They won't let us sit out here through Christmas. Christmas means something to some people. And maybe it's because I'm American, but I was like, Paul, an insurance company doesn't care about Christmas. They care about their bottom line.
Yeah.
And at that point, I think we had negotiated down to 18 million. And so I just knew that we were in it for the long haul. There was once Christmas and New Year's, we moved into the new year, I was like, we're gonna sit out here forever.
So how did you prepare yourself for what would lay ahead, in terms of the time frame? You're very realistic. And so, you know that this is going to take time, one, because of the negotiations, but also all the complexities.
We were just sitting there taking it sometimes minute by minute. I don't think you can prepare yourself for a life sentence that you have no idea how long it's going to be. The Amnesty International at one point defined torture as being detained illegally without basically knowing when it was going to end. And I paraphrase. And that really is a torturous feeling. If you're in prison, you know how long your sentence is, and you can, count those days on a calendar or mark them on a wall. But when you're being held hostage, you know nothing. You have no idea how long this thing is going to stretch out. And so sometimes the agony is more than I think even my mind even now can still comprehend or process. And you are really just trying to breathe minute to minute. And if I can get through the next 60 seconds, on good days, it was you know what, I can do this for another 30 days. I remember having those thoughts, taking a walk around the edge of camp when they would let me walk, and, trying to find light. The desert is a beautiful place. We had some bread this morning. I have all this time to sit here and think, what am I going to think about? I'm very much a person who tries to not see the bright side, but I'm a resourceful person. So I'm going to try to optimize my time, like how can I make this, how can I be productive, But then there were days where I was like, screw this being, this sucks. I hate this. I went out so bad. Like I just, like it's the biggest emotional roller coaster you could ever on.
What were your little wins? Were they like the little walks? And then how did you manage to tell time?
So I didn't lose count of the number of days because that's easy to keep track of. But the dates I did mess up. Like I didn't know it was Thanksgiving when it was Thanksgiving. And then as far as like time during the day, the sun, I mean, once you like start to figure out how that all works, I've always been outdoorsy, but never like a survival list or anything, so it's not like I could be like, oh, okay, and this is northeast, south, but I mean, you could figure out when it was high noon and when it was 3 o'clock or whatever. The little wins would be, big wins would be just getting through the day without losing my mind. That, I mean, other than dying, being assaulted, going insane was legitimately my biggest fear. I was afraid that I was going to go crazy and that I wouldn't be able to like rein it back in. And that I was really afraid of that. So I was very intentional about keeping my mind occupied and making it work and be productive. Your mind really slows down in a situation like this because you acclimatize to the speed, I guess, or the lack of speed of the day. And so when there's nothing going on, your brain really starts to slow down and it moves very slowly and it processes information much more slowly. And so sometimes it would be like doing a bunch of division in the dirt with a stick, and that was a small win. Other times it would be, I learned how to make bread in the sand. One of the pirates, we nicknamed him Helper. He was really kind. At least it felt like kindness then. I don't know on the outside how kind he was, but he taught me how to make a couple of things, and so that felt empowering.
How did he show you, like with a communication barrier?
He spoke English a little bit. And so, there's a lot of pointing and modeling and mimicking and showing. And I'm always, I don't know how to say this, but I was fortunate in the sense that, I'd been there for about 3 years. Like I would think about these people who just like their ships had gotten taken, or like they were on their boats, like they're tourists. And then all these Somalis like hop on and start yelling in Somali. Like that would be I mean, there's so much about that would have been so terrifying, but I kind of understood their nuances and the fact that they'd be screaming and you'd think that they were going to kill each other, and then the next minute they'd be laughing and it'd all be okay. And I got to the point where I could understand, oh, okay, we're waiting on someone's mom to come, or, oh, okay, like, so I observed a lot.
That's incredible. So can you talk about like the internal dynamics of that group?
That's a really good question. They were complicated, and there was definitely a hierarchy that was based on age, and then of course they're all chewing chat and completely addicted to chat, which is a green leaf that acts kind of like it stimulates like an amphetamine, and so like, if you've ever seen somebody super addicted to coffee first thing in the morning, this is like 10 times worse. And so they'd have their chat runner come out wherever we were. And then if somebody...
eyes look a bit diabolical.
Yes.
Right? With the pupil
for
just
sure.
Like fully dilated.
And then they've got like green slime all over their teeth because it turns into like kind of like a paste. And it's bitter and very dry. And then they drink really sweet cardamom tea to counteract. So then their teeth are rotting out. It's, and so then people are short-tempered because they're malnourished. They're high on chat. They're sleeping on the ground, like, I mean, it's a very harsh lifestyle. And there was a lot of infighting. There was a lot of disagreements. I mean,
how did it look like? Like, is it, butting the back of an AK on someone's face when they get into an altercation, or like, how violent did you feel like they were with each other and towards the potential towards you?
The violence towards me was, in my opinion, pretty high. I mean, I wasn't being regularly beaten up, but there were lots of times where we were being shoved or pushed or smacked, or guns put in our faces. Towards each other, I think it was just mainly screaming, a lot of screaming and yelling, and you could tell that they're angry at each other about something. They disagree on something. I think there were a lot of opinions about how this whole thing needed to be conducted and how it was going to go down. But at the end of the day, none of them were decision makers, because they were all just on the ground. They were just minions, being paid $20 a day and throwing cartons of cigarettes. So it didn't matter. And then they all got to cycle out 5 days on, 5 days off.
Really?
Groups. Yeah.
So then how hard was it to establish a connection? Because, right, you kind of want to establish rapport and a connection.
Try.
But then if it's so cyclical.
And then you got a group that comes in, and you got to stay away from all of them because they're scary. There were a couple that I trusted more than others. But at the end of the day, there wasn't anybody that I trusted or that I could really build much of a connection with, because they were all very heavily armed. They were high, and, life just doesn't have a lot of value in places like this with each other. And with me, that's why Abdullahi, the kid, he disappeared after New Year's Day. He threatened me with a knife to my neck, and they got rid of him because he was becoming a problem. He didn't understand that if he killed me, then they weren't going to get their money. So, I mean, it's complicated.
It's just, you would have this perspective to understand, but that bloodthirst at such a young age.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's just trauma. He'd already killed 3 people.
Had he?
Mm-hmm. So he said. I mean, he just had 2 black holes for eyes. Like this child didn't get a childhood. And this is, we were watching, that old movie Blood Diamond.
Yeah.
We were watching that last night with my son. He's 12. And I was like, oh God, this is really violent. But, it's about child soldiers, right? And sometimes I think it's good for him to watch stuff like that, because it gives him some context as to what we were doing. Worked in Africa, and also what's going on in the world around us. And I was watching it, and I'm like, this is a very real
portrayal.
Yeah, it really. I mean, it's Hollywoodized and whatnot, but I mean, this is what I saw. This is what I experienced. I mean, very different version of Africa, but these kids, it's so
indoctrination.
It's brainwashing.
Yeah, exactly. It's brainwashing, and it just shows you how susceptible the youth are. And then, to sort of an earlier point, how you just feel almost helpless in your ability to make concrete change.
Well, yeah, you can't, how do you fight corruption like that? In that kind of mindset where there really is no value to human life.
Was there a particular routine that you tried to establish where it was okay, giving yourself that level of control that maybe you needed that environment?
Yes, routine was very important. I think it was hard because we moved around so much. We probably had 50 or 60 different camps. So it was hard to, they moved us around all the time.
Oh my goodness. So
and by camp, I mean you pull your mat out. There was no camp.
Yeah.
If we were able to spend a good number of days in one particular place, then you could kind of get into a routine. So I got to a place where like I'd get up in the morning, wake up. We did have like tea in the morning. And then once we learned how to bake the bread, so something to eat. Again, not much and not always, but when there were ingredients, we would make that. And then I would drag my mat under a tree and I would do yoga for as long as I could. I wasn't very strong. I got really sick. So up until I got so sick that I was incapacitated, I would go through my yoga sequence. And then I don't know how I came up with this idea, but it was probably like 40 days into captivity. I decided that I had some stuff I needed to think about and some things that I needed to work through. Again, I think it stemmed from losing my mom and thinking like, when am I going to have time like this again? Where I have nothing to do. I have no one to talk to. I'm just out here. When I'm not being terrorized, I'm largely left alone. So how am I going to use this time? What am I going to do with this? Because I don't know if I'll ever have time like this again if I get out of here. So let me figure out what to do here. And so I decided that I was going to do a life review. Again, I have no idea why or what gave me that idea, but it seemed like a good idea. And so I got really organized and very structured. And mentally, it's not like I didn't have a pencil and a piece of paper. I didn't have anything to write with, but I was like, okay, so today is day 41 in captivity. So I'm going to spend all day thinking about everything that happened to me when I was 4 years old. Like I wanted to think through every single memory I could possibly remember and that I could attribute and attach to being 4 and then 5 and then 6 and then I just went on and on and on through my life and like dissected why I got married so young and why did that go south and this red flag and I went through every date that I went on with my husband Eric and like why did I almost break up with him two weeks into dating and what was it? It was very extensive because I had a lot of time on my hands. And what I found out, and I'm very grateful to understand this and know this now, is that I am completely in charge of what's going on in my head. It does not matter where my body is and what's going on in the environment around me. I have absolute autonomy and I have complete control of what I'm thinking about and how I'm thinking about it. And that was something that really set me free because, I think I'm pretty practical when it comes to like the power of positive thinking. That I'm not a toxic positivity person. But I do think that like what you focus on is going to continue to like, for good or for bad, it's going to grow. Yeah. And so I just visualized getting out of there. I visualized once I got through the life review, I visualized walking through my apartment in Nairobi, and I would get so into these visualizations that I could actually feel like the pillows as I fluffed them on my couch, and I would go in and make dinner, and I would mentally go through I'd do this every day, all day long. It was just like, it became this meditation. And then until it became a reality. It became my reality. And so I still do this today.
First of all, you are an embodiment of resilience. What you said about your mindset, nothing will get you through those situations more than what it is that you believe in that moment. Do you want to look at this as like the most horrible experience?
Yeah.
Or, you just had this incredible shift in your mind to be able to really make the best of the situation, a horrible situation, but make the best of it and bring value to yourself. And so, with visualization, had you always been sort of had like that spiritual leaning or like a dreamer or something like that? You were a dreamer.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always been that way since I was a kid. Grew up out in the country. There was nothing to do when I wasn't going to youth group or church group or whatever. I just remember being a kid laying in the grass looking at the clouds.
Wow.
And I joke a lot and say like I have the best temperament for being a hostage because I'm like very fine with being left alone. I'm also just very comfortable with silence. Like I've always kind of been that way. Like and especially now at this point in my life with kids and work and partner and all of that, like leave me alone for 24 hours and nothing going on. Like that's great. But I've never I've just always been, I remember being in junior high and my favorite part of my day was getting on the school bus because I could go climb into the back and just look out the window and think about whatever. And so I think I'm an extroverted introvert. So that helps, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a whole world inside.
Yeah. Okay, Jess, what about, because you weren't alone when you were with Poul, did you feel like there was a match when it came to your mindsets?
I think we both like ebbed and flowed, like there were certainly moments where I was like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know if I can do this, my relationship with Poul got really complicated because he told me on day 27 that actually there had been a kidnapping threat on the organization that he knew about, the security advisor knew about, and our boss's boss knew about, and no one had told me about it because they didn't want me to cancel the training. And so that was like such an assault on my my intuition in terms of, oh, I did know. So there was a lot to process there. And then it wasn't like I could really process how I felt about him or that decision while I was in captivity, because I was very conscious of the fact that he might be the last person I ever talked to in my life. And so I needed him in order to not lose my mind, and he needed me. I didn't really care about that as much as I needed him because he was just so selfish. And once I got out, there was a reckoning for sure, in terms of, and I just never felt like that was resolved. But I think we both did our best to try to stay positive as much as we could for each other. But there, as is with anything in life, there are good days and there are bad days. And when we were kept together the whole time either, there were large spans of time where we were kept separate. So we didn't even talk.
Really? Why do you think they did that?
As punishment, because they knew we needed that outlet. And so they would pull us apart as punishment.
What were we punishing you for? Like not getting the
negotiations
through yet?
Negotiations not moving in the right direction.
Okay. And so, with Poul, on day 27, the trust was broken at that point. But, he's necessary for you to continue during that time. But what was your reaction? Like that is the ultimate loss of trust where, it's somebody that has played a role in you potentially losing your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how was your reaction to that?
I felt very betrayed. I felt very hurt. He had been my friend, and I just couldn't believe that he would do something like that to me. I took it very personally. But I didn't have like the energy resources to be angry in that moment. I just had to compartmentalize it so I could get through this. So I put it on the shelf. But as soon as it was safe to pull it back off post captivity, I pulled it off. And that has been my forgiveness journey, is with him and the organization, not the pirates, the ones who actually did the kidnapping.
My goodness. Can we go back to, when you have to do a proof of life video?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that goes through your mind at that time? Did you feel like this is proof of life, for like a means to an end and getting a ransom payment? Or was it a goodbye? What did it feel like for you? How difficult was that?
It was surreal. All I could think about were like the videos that you see like from ISIS or Al Qaeda, you know, like I just couldn't believe that I was having to being forced to participate in something like that, where this could potentially be the last time my family saw me alive. I didn't know where the video would end up, but I figured it would probably end up on the news somewhere. And I think more than anything, I was just worried about like how Eric was going to react to see what my family and like how they would react. I mean, it's so weird too to be in a situation like this because you like there are days when you're like, I'm okay. I know I'm strong. I know I have what I need to get through the next 30 days, but they don't know that. So they're like beside themselves with worry because they have no idea if you're feeling strong or if you're not. And so I think that felt very present in that moment. So I was trying to show them that I'm okay and that I'm strong, but you also don't want to come across as too okay. You know what I mean? Because you need like people to like move things in the right direction, right? Because like you got to get out of here. Like this is, we can't keep doing this. So yeah, it was bizarre.
Was it chaotic? Like, what was going on around? Like, hey, say this,
No, it wasn't. It was a small group. It wasn't too chaotic. Jibril was there. He told us exactly what to say.
Jibril, the NGO guy,
yeah,
Kenya.
Yeah,
right.
He was there, of course. And I think more than anything, it was just like very worrisome because this was like a last resort, right? Like things like they're still not offering enough. And you're like, God, like offer enough already. Like, come on, you know? And so I don't remember when we did that. I know it had to have happened like before Christmas and the New Year because our last proof of life call was January 16th, 2012. And I had contracted a urinary tract infection.
Right.
That was moving into a kidney infection. And I knew this because I'd had one a year before, and I was hospitalized for a week. So I knew the signs, and they wouldn't bring me the right medications. They would just bring me like broad spectrum antibiotics. They wouldn't bring a doctor out. And so this was becoming something that they were using to negotiate with, right? Because they didn't need me not sick. They just needed me like alive enough, right? So that they could cash me in. And so it was unfortunate and fortunate that I got so ill, but the fact that I wasn't getting the treatment that I needed started to really scare me because, I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I knew a kidney infection going untreated out in the desert meant I was going to die. Yeah. So I listed out my symptoms to the communicator the family communicator. It was a woman who called herself Alex. I do not like confrontation. And so I don't like yell at people, you know, but I got really like over the phone in her face. And I said, you know, because we had 6 proof of life calls, and every time I talked to her, she would say things were moving in the right direction, like things making me feel like, okay, maybe we got another week, like, you know, and then 2 weeks would go by and we were still there with no movement. And I just said to her, if you guys don't do something and get me out of here, like in the next week, I'm going to die and it's going to be your fault. And that was hard for me to say, but it was the truth.
Yeah.
And I needed her to know that because I didn't know if I was going to be able to, I didn't know if I was going to have another phone call.
You talked about like those meditations and things that you'd have, but you must have been under so much pain. Did you have like moments of where you were like bargaining with God? Like, get me through this and I will, you know?
I don't know if I would like categorize it as bargaining. I think there was a lot of conversation with God. There's a lot of conversation with my mom. I actually think what I did rather than bargain is I surrendered. The morning after my mom passed, we were all there. My siblings and their partners, and Eric was on his way. He was in Europe. And my dad asked us to come into the kitchen and pray. He wanted to pray together. And, that was a tradition in our family. So that wasn't anything strange. And we gathered around the kitchen table where we'd spent, our childhoods. And I remember my dad gripping the top rung of the kitchen chair, and his knuckles were white. He was holding on to it for dear life. And he is a very quiet person. He is not given to emotion, especially in front of people. And he was sobbing and he couldn't get the words out, but what he did get out was, "I don't understand, but I choose to trust." And I found myself saying those words to God, to myself over and over again. I would it was my mantra. And when I was able to walk the perimeter of the camp, I would just say over and over again, "I don't understand, but I choose to trust. I don't understand, but I choose to trust," over and over again. And that brought me so much peace, because I think at the end of the day, did I want to survive? Did I want to get out of there? Did I want to live? Yes. 150,000%. But I understood that I had no control. And I needed something to trust in that was bigger than myself. And I needed to trust in this situation that I could never understand really how I got there and why me and all the things. And so I just surrendered. And I think ultimately that's what my resilience is based out of, is just this living my life in a place of surrender.
And the surrender, is it I don't know why this is happening, but I trust that it's happening for a purpose, and that there's something that you were being prepared for?
I think, sure, that's part of it. I think also it can mean a lot of things. For me, in that moment, it felt like however this thing is going to turn out, whether this is the end of my life or it's the beginning of another one, I choose to trust that this is all part of the plan, that this is all for my good. And if this is the end of my life, then I've had a really good run. And again, it's not giving up, but surrender is a place of acceptance.
Mm.
And I have also learned the hard way that it's just so much easier to accept and surrender than it is to fight and struggle. And so that really was where I was at that night, where, I prayed to my mom that night, and I said, it was my 92nd day, 93rd night. And I said, "Look, here, if you can go work out, work some magic, pull some strings with whoever's up there, it'd be awesome, because I really feel like I don't have a whole lot of time left here. I'm really sick." And so I fall asleep and wake up a couple hours later with the need to be sick, because I was constantly throwing up or something was happening. And there were 9 guys on the ground that night, and they had a goat earlier in the day. Once a week, someone would bring a live goat out and they would slaughter it and then cook it. And so, their tummies were full. They'd chewed all their chat. Everybody was passed out. They're snoring. Helpers laying next to me. And I say toilet, that was how I asked to leave the mat. That was how I asked permission. Toilet. No one wakes up, but they're all passed out. Getting quite desperate, because I don't want to be sick on my mat. And so I take a small flashlight and I start flashing it. It's like a little pen light, and I half crawl to a bush nearby and do what I need to do and come back. I don't want anybody to think that I've tried to escape.
Yeah.
Which is the point of the pen light. in case they wake up. No one wakes up, come back to my mat, roll myself back up. I have no idea what time it is. It's just very, very dark. And I can't really see anything. Like, so dark, you can't really see your hand in front of your face. And then all of a sudden, I hear helper on my left stir. And then he's up. He's like awake. I can tell he's like awake. And I can't see him, but I can sense that he's afraid. You know, you can just feel like there's a charge, right? And he's whisper screaming at all the others in Somali, like basically wake up. And then the night just erupts into automatic gunfire, just like bullets everywhere. And I'm thinking, oh my God, like what is happening here? And I'm trying to make myself as low as I possibly can down onto the ground. And if I could have dug a hole and disappeared into it, I would have, but I'm just trying to make myself, I'm like just trying to disappear into the ground under my blanket. Helper drops to the ground right next to me. There's somebody at my feet, like they're dropping like flies. And then they're being shot, they're dying. And I'm thinking like, finally Al-Shabaab found us. Like, that's what I'm thinking. And I'm like, I really don't have it in me to to learn another group, to like do this whole thing again. Like, and I think I finally like come to a place of understanding of like, I don't think I'm going to make it out of this thing alive. Like, I've been hopeful.
Yeah.
And positive, trying to be. And I really think this might be the end of my life. And then somebody grabs my feet, like my ankles, and then another set of hands grab my shoulders and pull the blanket away from me. And I just have my hands in front of me. I'm trying to protect myself. I think I'm fighting back. I think, my memory is like I'm doing this, but I've been since been told that that's not what I was doing. I was cowering and trying to hide behind my hands. And I can't see anything. But I hear off to my right this man's voice, and he's American. He has an American accent, and he knows my name. And he says something to the effect of, Jessica, it's okay, please don't be afraid. We're the American military. We've been sent here to take you home. You're safe now. And I can't, again, it's like my brain is sludge, right? Like, I cannot process, like, when I'm in fight or flight and I start shaking, like uncontrollably shaking, like almost like I'm having a seizure. I can't stop shaking, and I'm just cold, so cold. And all I can see is, you're American? Wait a second, you're American? I cannot think how this could, and I'm so surprised, right? Because I'm thinking the person who's pulling the blanket away from my face is gonna shoot me in the head or decapitate me. Like, I'm thinking again that I'm about ready to die, and instead it's an American soldier. Like, that never entered the realm of possibilities for me in my mind. And he says, we've been watching you very closely. We know how sick you've been. Then he has antibiotics, and he has a clean bottle of water, and he hands it to me. And then I can start, you start getting used to, so I'm seeing I'm surrounded by other like soldiers. And one of them's like, do you know where your shoes are? And I don't know where my shoes are. I have no idea. And he picks me up and throws me over his shoulder and like starts running across the desert with me on his shoulder. And I'm just thinking, like, how is this my life? Like, I'm a school teacher from Ohio. Like, I grew up next to a pig farm. Like, how is this my life? And he puts me down on the edge of camp. And my first question is, where's Paul? Did he make it out okay? Is he alive? And he's sitting there, and he says, do you know who these guys are? And I'm like, no. And he says, this is SEAL Team 6. These are the guys that got Osama bin Laden last year. And I'm just like, I don't think I even really understood who SEAL Team 6 was. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of feel silly in admitting that. But I mean, again, why would I? Like, why would I know? Like, why would they be here? Like, how did they, there's so many questions. And then that would just then unfold into where I'm at now. And the fact that somehow, some way, Providence made it possible for like 24 of the Americans, like military most elite soldiers, found me in the middle of the desert, parachuted out of a helicopter in the middle of the night, and hiked 3 miles in, found me. I didn't get caught in the crossfire, and here I am today.
Incredible.
I mean, it really and truly is.
Wow. And, you know, the moment of your rescue, I imagine everything's just kind of going in slow motion and all of that. What the act in itself is so heroic, but they were so focused on protecting you as well, you know, from any possible injury or assault.
Yeah.
And they would even use their own bodies to protect you.
Yeah. At one point, they didn't think the premises were safe, and so they had Paul and I lay down on the ground. And I don't know how many, I don't remember, 4 maybe of them laid down on top of us. And then the rest of them formed a human shield around us. And we laid like that until the helicopters came in to get us.
It was every bit as daring a mission as the one that got bin Laden, but this time an American hostage is coming home. It was the middle of the night when Navy SEALs on board a special operations plane parachuted into Somalia's darkness to rescue the aid workers. The target, a compound where 32-year-old Jessica Buchanan and Danish aid worker Poul Thisted had been held for 3 months. As the SEAL team stealthily approached the compound on foot, shots rang out, but the SEALs moved quickly, returning fire. All of the hostage takers reportedly killed. The SEALs kept moving, making their way inside, where they found the aid workers alive. Outside, U.S. helicopters swooped in. The hostages were placed on board and flown to a U.S. base in Djibouti. Buchanan and Thisted, who worked for a Danish aid organization, were helping with demining when their convoy was attacked last October. U.S. officials say the attackers were common criminals and pirates seeking ransom. The head of the aid organization told ABC News this morning that the 32-year-old Buchanan, who is from Bedford, Virginia, has been strong throughout. The operation, which had been highly classified, ended just before the president gave his State of the Union address last night. He gave a tip that something was afoot when he pointed out Defense Secretary Leon Panetta.
Leon, good job tonight. Good job tonight.
But President Obama made no mention of the rescue, nor did the head of Special Operations, Admiral Bill McRaven, who was a guest of the First Lady. It was McRaven, a Navy SEAL, who played a big role in the bin Laden mission. The president authorized the raid on Monday. When he spoke to Jessica's father last night, he told him that Americans have Jessica in their thoughts and prayers and are thankful she will soon be reunited with her family.
And these heroes, you know, they also have families and children and wives, and their mission to bring you home, to, you know, open up that opportunity for you. You know, I get emotional just talking about it. I can't imagine living through that. Can you talk about the bond and the favor that you have for these heroes and what you'd like future generations to know about that heroism, that bravery, that willingness to sacrifice? What is it that makes your experience, you know, those members of SEAL Team 6, unlike so many other people that we just see out in the world?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've had the good fortune to be welcomed into the SEAL community as if I were one of their own. I find that to be so incredibly generous and special. I think the thing that will forever be the most impressionable about the SEALs and their community is how unassuming they are and how humble. They faded into the shadows. Like, I saw some of their faces on one of the planes as we were headed to, I think, a military base in Djibouti. I was able to say thank you. I mean, in my shock, I'm still shaking. And then they just disappear. There's no expectation. They're just doing their job. This is what they live for. I've since met many SEALs who were on my mission, who have done other missions that I have no idea what they are, and who are new SEALs. I've become friends with wives who've lost their husbands in active duty or to death by suicide because of the traumatic brain injuries and all the other results of their job. And they don't ask for anything in return. They are it's called the service because it is true and utter service to our country and to our citizens. And I didn't know that existed because, again, how could I and why would I? But I also think that we as Americans don't know what we don't know because they get that way. It's kind of like what we were talking about with our intuition. Like, when we act on it, we don't know what we're missing or what fear we're dangerous situation we're dodging. But I kind of feel like that's the kind of life I get to lead now is I don't know what sort of awful things I have been able to avoid or not experience because of the work that they do behind the scenes. Yeah. And they do it. They don't make a lot of money. They leave their families for long periods of time without being able to communicate. Their wives or partners are raising their kids largely alone. And it's, I don't know how they do it. I think I understand why they do it, but have had the opportunity to be a recipient, a first-hand recipient, and hopefully a lot of people don't need dozens of Navy SEALs to come in and rescue them. Mm-hmm. But you can be assured that the reason you're able to live the life that you're able to live today is because somebody sacrificed hugely for it, whether it was they gave their lives or they gave up their freedom or they gave up a relationship or they gave up time with their children or their families, whatever it is, somebody sacrificed so that you could live the life that you're living today.
Yeah, that's so true. And they're quiet professionals, and there's so much that, we don't know about, which is, what makes it so emotional sometimes, right, is because they are willing to do this because they care about something so much beyond themselves. And, I'm glad that you were a beneficiary of their incredible acts of service. And, to those in the shadows, we pray for your safety and security. So can you talk about some of the work that you're doing with the Navy SEAL Foundation now?
So largely it has just been about raising awareness and fundraising. Navy SEAL Foundation is incredible and what they're able to do in support of the community for fallen and active duty SEALs and their families. So it's really about just telling my story and so that people just the conversation that we've just had so that they understand the implications. Because, when someone dies, during active duty, they leave behind families and women, wives who've spent, they've spent their time supporting their mission, and then suddenly they're strapped with single parenthood and mortgage and, all the other things. And so it's, so expansive what they do, and just really incredible people. And I'm so grateful to have gotten the opportunity to get to know them and to support them in that way.
Yeah, and I absolutely love the advocacy work that you do, going around the country and talking about your experience. I'd love to ask you a little bit, when you mentioned during your time in captivity, sort of your brain slowing down, when you were reintegrated into society, what was that like? Was there overwhelm, and how did you start to get back into day-to-day activities?
It took forever. It's what I call surviving survival. So this space of time that people who've experienced trauma, and like you have the event and then you have the after, and that after is sometimes harder to survive than the actual event. I got pregnant with my son right after the rescue. And so I got thrown into this whole new phase of life that I wasn't quite prepared for. Physically, obviously, it was an act of God that happened. I lost 45 pounds during kidnapping, and I was, it was a long time ago. So I was so severely malnourished and underweight. And then it was like, I think beyond that, it was also like, what is my purpose? Like this long pilgrimage or exploration, this journey to figuring out what and who I was and what I was supposed to do in the world. I was so wrapped up in my identity of what I did in Africa and who I was and that work that felt really meaningful and important. And then I didn't have it anymore. And so it took a really long time. And there was nothing to acclimatize to because or like get back to, because it all changed. I was changed. I had to leave Africa to the US. I'm a mom now. Like my whole identity has changed. How I feel about the world has changed. How I feel about myself has changed, and my work, and everything was completely different. So it was more of a reinventing than anything, and that takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of time, and there's a lot of grief. And a lot of money spent on therapy. And I've just written a book about that surviving survival piece that'll be out in October, because I really feel like it's being able to hone in on what that next version of purpose is that helps people survive that time.
We just marked Memorial Day.
Mm-hmm.
What does freedom mean to you?
Well, freedom to me means being at peace. Yeah. So whatever that looks like, being in a peaceful environment in our country, being spiritually and emotionally at peace with what's happened in my life, and how I've been able to use that, and just being at peace with myself for the decisions that lessons that I've learned along the way. And of course, there are the things like being able to move freely and be able to choose what I want to eat and when I want to go to bed, those kind of things that I still don't really take for granted. But I think more than anything, it's about being at peace with all of us and what has happened and how it's transpired, and how I have allowed it to change my life.
No better person to ask that question to, I must say. Those 93 nights, did they bring closure to you on some of the traumas that you had dealt with? And then also, do you think that it reset your relationship with your mom, even though she had passed?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really lovely question. There's no doubt in my mind that she was there with me through that every single minute of every single day. I think in a way it repaired our relationship because it was just what it was. And yeah, I think I laid some grudges down, and I asked for forgiveness for some things, and I forgave in other areas. And I haven't revisited some of those things that I used to ruminate over. It was so life-changing in so many ways.
I'm so glad you had that. You're a mom. We're both moms. And it's such a, it's such an honor, right, to raise this next generation of children. What do you hope your experience will teach our next generations, our children?
You can do hard things. And just because it hurts doesn't mean it's impossible.
That's so lovely. What a great piece of wisdom that I hope my children will listen to one day and
mine too.
Take it. They will. Well, Jess, I want to thank you so much for doing this podcast. And I'd love to talk to you about, as we bring this to an end, the book Impossible Odds. Where am I at? Right here. So Impossible Odds is the book that you wrote. And I imagine this must have been such catharsis for you.
It has been, but it comes in stages, right? So we wrote it very quickly after the ordeal, just because we were expecting and we wanted something in writing for our son. In retrospect, I probably longer, but it just is what it is, and so I'm glad we have it. Kids are getting old enough to where they're starting to ask questions now, and I can be like, go read it for yourself.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. And then now you also have 2 anthologies that you've come out with. I'll have links to all of these, and hopefully we'll be reading your book very soon as well for recounting more. Yeah. But can you talk to me about Desert to Mountaintops, and, what is it that inspired you as well to create your own publishing company?
Well, I think Impossible Odds really gave me the platform to tell my story in a way that I think a lot of people hope that they get to. And so I'm very lucky in that regard. And women started coming to me from all over and asking, like, how'd you do that? And I was like, oh, well, how I did it. Unfortunately, the landscape of publishing has changed tremendously in the last 10 years, largely due to social media. And so it's really inaccessible to most people, unless you're a celebrity or you have a huge following. So I saw this, this need for an alternative way of publishing. And so we created Soul Speak Press, which is a boutique publishing company for women who've been through something. Now they know something and they want to teach us something. And so we've had tremendous success. It's been incredible I think we've worked with, 150 women to date. And with the anthologies, we build in a coaching component. So they're learning. Again, I'm always going to be teaching in some regard. And then we walk them through the publishing and the book launching process. So we're starting our 4th actually now. We help women just with Singapore publish their work as well. And it feels very purposeful and very, very meaningful to be able to help women get their stories out into the world.
Are there any in particular that really stand out to you?
We have one coming out in a couple of months. Kate, she is an incredible woman, Kate Myers. She also ignored her intuition. She was in an abusive relationship. She was 20. She was ejected from his car while it was going 90 miles an hour. She landed in the middle of the interstate. And the only reason she's here today is because a passerby stopped and got out of the car and stood over her to make sure a semi didn't run over her down 95. She flatlined twice on the way to the hospital. She broke almost every bone in her body. She did learn how to re-walk. And then she was addicted to opiates because of all of the pain, and she got herself off of those as well. And she is just this beautiful woman. She's a mom of 2 little kids. She's married to a veteran. She's got this beautiful life now, and she is just such a story and testament to redemption. So it's stories like that that I feel really lucky to get to help get out into the world.
To wrap up, 2 more questions that I, traditionally will ask on the podcast. What is it that you think makes a good leader?
I think being a good leader is someone who really can take charge of their mindset. I mean, I can't stress this enough. It really is about the frame of mind that you're in, and it's so contagious. So whatever you're thinking about is going to set the environment and set the stage for whether you succeed or whether you fail. And if you're in leadership and, you're constantly critical and self-sabotaging and, outwardly sabotaging, like obviously it's just going to all crumble and fall. And so I've learned so much about leadership just through my own work, my own deep inner work. And I mean, there are so many other things I could say, but I really do think it really is about mindset.
What's the greatest triumph you think that you've had in the whole inner work experience?
Not giving up.
Love that. And my final question is that you were once in the shadows from a small town, very few people heard of Jess Buchanan. And now, you're a public figure and you are doing so much work because of that experience. If you could go back and do it all again, would you want to be a gray man or not be a gray man?
Oh, no, I don't think I was meant to be a gray man.
Yeah, you're living your purpose. That's for sure. Well, Jess, I really want to acknowledge you for your resilience and for your mindset and, your leadership, because you symbolize so much, not just to women, but to people that are going through challenges in life, that there really is in the most difficult of circumstances, that light, proverbial light at the end of the tunnel. And I hope that if there's one thing we can take from this podcast, it's really the importance of one's mindset. And, I really appreciate you being so candid and transparent as well, which makes, for good leaders as well. Hint, hint to the, NGO community. If you have information about abductions, you should be sharing it with people that would be impacted. But anyways, thank you so much for being here today. And, I really appreciate you so much and your story. Thank you for sharing it with the world.